Bear with me for the next little while as we talk about what I think Canada can do to win in artificial intelligence. And the first most important thing, and I talked to lots of the folks you saw on stage, is you have to define what winning means. And this is a dangerous thing, quite frankly, for Canadians. Because what we start to do before the game even starts is to define winning to a place where we're comfortable knowing we might have a chance to win. If there's 100 mid-sized companies, are we winning? Yeah, we could probably do that. OK, that's winning. But I think that's kind of baloney. I think that if we're seriously asking this question, if we're taking it seriously, what does it mean to be a winner, you need to have a very clear idea of what winning means. And it's winning relative to what our competitors think winning is. Right? If you're playing in a game and you're the only person who thinks you won, you haven't won. You've got yourself a little star for participation. OK? And that's what is the dangerous thing for our country to do. I mean, listen, this is an amazing event. It is not what it used to be here. But if you think that we're not competing globally, you're drinking too much of the champagne here, OK? We're in a desperate fight. And winning is defined by what our competitors think. What is the game that we're in? So let me take you through 4 things I think winning means to be a winner in artificial intelligence here. By the way, it's fun, like even Canadians, it's kind of icky to talk about winning. Oh, that's not good. It's not cooperative and collaborative. By the way, that's not true. Turns out when Canadians had owned the podium, we loved winning. It was great. So it's not true, but let's be explicit about it. So the first thing, big platform companies. I love that there was this topic. And I love that Steve Irvine said exactly this, 10 Shopifys. That is a very objective thing for us to understand, that in 10 years, if we don't have 10 companies the size of Shopify, we haven't won. Not whether we feel good about ourselves, but have we created, and let's be specific, in that case, it would represent $100 billion of equity value created in Canada by Canadian companies. Okay? And second of all, it would mean tens of thousands of jobs, high-quality, high-paying jobs in these areas. But I'm going to go back a step because there's an important point I made. It is not just big companies. It is big platform companies. Shopify is a platform. Thousands of people around the world are building on Shopify, and Shopify is generating data. If you don't think Shopify is going to probably end up being one of the biggest AI companies out there, I think you're missing something. We need to build platform companies, companies that the rest of the world builds on top of. If we don't figure out how to do that, we have not won. Second thing, winning means to us. And just to be clear, Jordan's question, it's not an explicit trade-off. If we have 10 big companies, we will for sure have millions and billions of wealth created. People will be investing back in the economy. People will learn the startup game. They will leave. That work brain experience will happen 100 times over. You'll have lots of mid-sized companies if you have a few giants. You'll create wealth in the economy. You'll create jobs. You'll do all the things that we want to do. It's a necessary and it's not sufficient. It's necessary. You have to have both big companies in order to have all the other good stuff that you want. OK, second thing winning means, to me at least. Well, let's be clear. Canada is the first country in the world that truly creates artificial generalized intelligence. This is the holy grail. This is the big kahuna. Who figures out how to build an entity, an intellect, a being that has intelligence that's truly generalized? And this is important from an academic perspective because this is what we all ultimately are trying to create. And here's the thing. If you even remotely take seriously what that means, what implication an AGI being created is on human society, you understand that it's true there could be potential nightmare scenarios. So wouldn't you rather that be a Canadian entity? Wouldn't you rather that the creation of the first artificial intelligence has our ethos, not another nation state? Because make no mistake, we are in a nation-state battle to figure this out, and I'll talk about that in a second. So winning to me is we're the first country that figures that out. If China comes up with an AGI before us, we lost. Point 3, not becoming economic serfs. And I understand it's inflammatory language, but these are very big companies. They are gobbling up industry after industry. And by the way, I have friends who work there. I love these companies. We don't have to be reflexively against them, but we have to be very cognizant that Canada is not the home domicile of any of these companies. That's point 1. Okay? Because if we don't do that, those guys will own our data. They will own our interactions. They will own our commerce, our banking, our travel. So guess what? If it turns out these guys own everything, we didn't win. Let's go to the last reason. Forget about economic serfs. Let's just not be serfs, okay? Because this guy, he's not kidding around. Whoever figures out AI will be the ruler of the world. I would prefer our guy wearing socks to this guy, okay? Whatever you say. I think it's important for people to understand that this is comparable to Sputnik. This is comparable to the nuclear battles that we had. This is, at least in the area of warfare, this is the third wave. Gunpowder, nuclear weapons, AI. It's an existential crisis, I believe. So winning, if Russia is the first country to fight a completely drone war with completely autonomous vehicles and takes us out, we didn't win, FYI. Okay, so now we have an idea of what winning means. Big companies, we are independent, we have a country, we are not serfs, right? We create platforms, we create wealth, we figure out how to transition to a new economy. That's what winning means to me. So how do we get there? The first is we have to get people to understand that this actually matters, right? We have to ask them, what do? We have to have this conversation on and on with each other. It's not like I have the answer. The answer is probably inside this room, or someone who's attended one of these events, or some student who's in elementary school being inspired right now. But we have to keep asking this question, how do we win? It's not enough to have conferences. It's not enough to hold up our winners. We have to actually be objective as did we win or not. David Ossip is a great mentor of mine, and he taught me something really important. He said, Daniel, don't believe your own bullshit. It's great to promote to the world, but you have to be very cold-eyed about where you realistically are as a business or as a country. This is going to take time. It's 30 years, right? We love to think about the hype, but it will take time, even under the best and most optimistic perspectives of how long this will take. So we should be patient as we figure this out. So let's go to some prescriptive things. The first, and I think the most important thing that's starting to happen, is that we take it seriously. We take all the implications of what artificial intelligence means seriously. And the reason why I say this is because while you and I and everyone here is like, of course, AI is a real thing, most of Canada doesn't. Okay? I've been in meetings with, titans of industry, multi-billionaires. And we're like, AI, Canada owns it. We have a huge advantage. It's a real thing. And, one of the folks was like, really? I don't know. How does it matter? Trust me, there's more people who think that than think what you think. We have to take it seriously. That's a big task, but that's the most important thing. Because if you start to take it seriously, then all the other stuff flows from it. In general, my theme for how we win is this. We have to be very open. We have to be open to new people, new ideas, new concepts. We have to be very adaptive. Canadian society, be candid, does not change quickly. We're rigid in some ways. And that's going to be hurting us because we're going to be hanging on to the past while our competitors, the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, are moving forward and being more flexible, adaptive to what's happening. And we have to invest. So open, adaptive, and investing in this over the long term. So where are the specific areas? And I'm pointing this out thematically because there's 1,000 tactical things you could do. But number one thing is talent. The good news is Tomi's in the back, Jordan's in the back, Ed Clark, we've got this Vector Institute, we've got U of T, we've got Waterloo. We are attracting talent from all over the world. But we have to continue these programs. Why does everyone who gets a master's degree or a PhD in machine learning not have an automatic entry into Canada? Why aren't we attracting these people from all over the world? We can do so much more on immigration. But talent isn't just about immigration. It's also about education. So all the programs that we're doing to create, I was so happy to hear this machine learning track at U of T. We can continue to push this out, investing in education. And not just education for students, but education for people working in big companies who are going to have to understand how these technologies are going to impact them. Okay? So investing in talent is the number one thing. It's the underlying thing of everything, because most things just happen through people. Well, at least for now, right? So we kind of need people. And I think we need to think much more aggressively about what talent means, because it also means population. Part of the advantage that other countries have is they have very large populations. That creates lots of data. So Jordan's right that in healthcare, we have all the records. But guess what? The Chinese have 1.4 billion people, and they don't respect privacy or in anywhere near the same way. They have all the records, too. And they will do a lot of different things. Now, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting we ape or copy them, but we have to be adaptive and understand the game that we're playing. So on population, we need to think differently about our country. We should be aiming for 100 million people in Canada. We should be thinking about Toronto as a city with 15 million people in the next 30 to 40 years. That's how much we should be upping the game. And before you freak out and say we'll be too overcrowded, anyone ever been to the Netherlands? Lovely country. If Canada had the population, I mean, parks, greenery, very wonderful. If Canada had the population density of the Netherlands in the lower 10% of our country, 90%, all the same, but just the lower 10%, we would have 100+ million people here. It's not that crazy. We can do it, and we can build a great place to live. But it's much different scale than what we're thinking about. Data. Well, that population is going to churn off data. I think Jordan's right. We, as a country, should be using our data sets as advantages in healthcare, in government, in tax, in transportation. And we should be pushing people to say we have to find a way to make use of this so that we can build algorithms that can predict and improve the performance of our services in our country. It's not give us data so that we can have data. It's give us data so we can improve cancer treatment times, or we can improve responsiveness on the highways, or we can to get your fire truck to you faster. We can predict when a problem could occur somewhere. So this is in purpose of having a better government, better services, but we need access to data. Regulation. This is an area that I spend a little bit of time thinking about. And I'm actually going to make a meta point about regulation. Not that we should change this law or that law, although there are plenty of laws. The biggest thing that we have to understand, I think, is that our model and system of creating regulations was created in a time over hundreds of years when things did not change as fast as they change now. If you take any of the predictions seriously about exponential growth, about accelerating exponentials, because it's not just AI, it's AI operating in the field of genomics. It's AI operating in the field of manufacturing. AI changing our jobs, right? It's impacting everything. Our regulatory structures are not really ready to change that quickly. If you want to understand what that looks like, look at Uber. Everyone talks about Uber hacking the taxi cab system. It's not that. They hacked the regulatory system. They went around the politicians. They built something better for people. They got to the populace. The populace said, thank you very much, politicians. Very interesting regulation. You're not taking this away from us. They had to respond. So in my mind, the government of Canada, the government of Ontario has to be much more proactive. Why was Ontario not the very first first jurisdiction to say we want autonomous cars being here? We had to follow California, Michigan, and a bunch of other places. We have to have a much more open regulatory model that starts thinking about how we bring people here in financial services, in medical healthcare, in other areas. Capital. It's been mentioned before. I think actually Canada's doing better in this, much, much better than we used to do before in terms of capital, because I know there's a number of new $100 million funds. I know that there's new angel funds. In the room, I know 2 people who started angel funds recently, one just for investing in AI. I know of my former partners, that's a $100 million fund. There was another $100 million fund started, Scale Up Ventures I'm on an advisory board for. So there's money coming in, but it's still a fraction. Canadian startups do not raise as much money as fast as our American competitors. We need more access to capital. Now, the one area where I think that people might not like this around concentration is, guess who the biggest venture capitalist in the country is? The government of Canada. The government of Canada puts $3.6 billion a year via SR&ED and maybe another billion through IRAP back into our economy. And my concern with that program, as wonderful as it has been for so many entrepreneurs, is that it is nowhere near as concentrated as it needs to be. If we reallocated 10 to 20% of that SR&ED program, right? But just think about the scale, right? $3.5 billion, that's like 5 or 6 Excels and Sequoia every year is spent by our country on funding R&D. I think we can be moving that into a more concentrated way so that SR&ED still exists, but maybe it's not as rich as it is, but some of that money starts going into programs that are more like VCAP or others. I particularly like matching. I basically think if you raise money from a qualified third party, the government should just match you with undiluted debt. But I don't want to keep ranting too much. Capital. Incentives. Okay? Look, I am not a tax absolutist. I'm not all about these crazy. There's a balance to be reached. But I will tell you that of the current proposals from our federal government, I'm very concerned about one thing, which seems so esoteric, because it kind of is. It doesn't affect a heck of a lot of people. But those are the very people that we need to affect. We are going to remove the lifetime capital gains exemption for a founder who starts it and who sets up a trust and gives their shares away to their kids. Let's be clear. You gave away your shares. They're not yours, and your kid now can take advantage of that for their lifetime. That's being taken away. Now, that might not seem like a very big deal. I mean, even understanding it's hard. But what it really means is that a person like Steve Irvine, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, because that's who, by the way, is most likely to succeed in a startup. It's not an 18-year-old with a hoodie. It's a 32-year-old who has work experience and kids and a life, and they're going to quit their job because they understand something. So here's the thing. Most startups don't get sold for $50 or $100 million. Those people don't care about their exemptions. They made a lot of money. Most startups get sold for $5 or $10 million, and they don't own all of it at the end. So the difference that this one rule is going to make, and let's be clear, it's not like the other rules. Lifetime capital exemption is explicitly an incentive to get you to create companies. What's going to end up happening, I fear, is that a lot of people who are at the margin, should I quit my high-paying job at the bank and go build this company? Well, all of a sudden, I could have made $4 million after 7 years of hard work. My family could, but now you can make 3. That's a big difference. Or I could make 3, but now I'm going to make 2. So this one change actually is a subtle thing, but I think makes a big difference. I know it may be esoteric, but I kind of think incentives matter. We need to care about that as a country, that we're setting incentives up for people to build companies. Competition. Everyone loves to talk about innovation. It's wonderful. There's like 1 million studies and government commissions and 42 programs. But no one wants to talk about the big reason why innovation is not happening as much as we want here. Competition. I know lots of Americans. I work there. They don't innovate out of the goodness of their heart. They don't innovate because it's a wonderful thing to do. Businesses innovate because they have competition. If they don't have more innovative products and services, they die. They know what winning is. Well, here's the problem with Canada. And I understand the arguments about sovereignty. We need to understand them. But there's a flip side. When most of your economy is not exposed to the rawness of competition, your people will not behave in the same way as innovatively because they don't have to. Just go through the economy, OK? And think about part of our economy that's not in some way protected. Telcos, airlines, healthcare, 30 to 40% of our economy, right? All of them are good reasons why we want to protect. The banks, dairy farmers. But after a while, it starts to add up to decreasing the overall competitiveness of the country, which is the root cause of productivity and innovation. There's no way that a farm company is going to start investing in AI unless they're worried that they have to be more efficient and more productive than their Argentinian competitors. That's an important part of this equation. Intellectual property. We have to do things that acknowledge there is a world intellectual property program. We should continue to have all the openness in AI and sharing of ideas. But do not mistake the fact that other people are playing a game to try and shut us down. The Chinese are amassing patents and intellectual property at a crazy rate. So are the Americans. We're nowhere in that game. So it's not about whether philosophically we like the patent system. We just need to figure out ways to protect our Canadian companies. And by the way, all this stuff is, I think, starting to happen. In that area, we could do patent pools for the country, and especially around artificial intelligence. We could also do a fund to support prior art. So if you get hit by a patent infringement by a troll, you can actually defend yourself by invalidating their other patents. And that was an idea actually by a Canadian, Michelle Zatlin at Cloudflare. That's what they're doing as a company level, but we at a country level could do that. A couple more things. Branding. I think our prime minister at every occasion should be standing up, and our premier and our mayor who is doing it, and talking about Toronto and Canada as the AI capital of the world. It matters. We should continue to invest in that. Social policy. We have to get this right too. How do we win? Guess what? There's going to be disruption. Canada should be not fighting the disruption that will come from changes in jobs, in trucking and farming. But instead, we should be experimenting aggressively now so that we have the most reflective and responsible social policy. Maybe it is a guaranteed minimum income. Maybe it's something else. But we can't expect that the current social system will stay the same. And we have to start experimenting with it so that we're ready. That's how we're going to win. And the last thing, and I save it for last because I think in some ways it might be the most important. We would not be here. None of this conversation would be happening without pure science, pure curiosity-based research. I'm a very commercial person. I like making money. I want our companies to make money. I really believe in things like CDL to take ideas and technology and turn them into companies that create value. But that does not mean that I or others should ignore how do we get there in the first place. As academics or people who support academics, they need to have funding and grants that's not just about how are you going to make money tomorrow, because you're never going to get the innovation of Jeff Hinton. CFAR supported Jeff and Jan and Rich Sutton and supported these people for years when there was no money, nothing to be made. So this is a super worthwhile thing for our country. OK, so that's the summary of a few areas where I think we can win. We know what winning means. We're not serfs. We have 10 big companies here. We're not economic serfs. And we're the first to AGI. And here are some of the policy areas I think our country can do to get us there quicker. There we go. There's the slide. Open, adaptive, and invested. And last thing I would say, you can tweet at me anytime. I'm D. Debow. I have this new company, Helpful. And if you have questions, you can follow up with me or start a conversation. Just download the app. I'm just Daniel at Helpful. You can send me a message, a video message there, and I'm happy to engage with you anytime you want.